Hey guys, it's Rachel. It's Thankful Thursday and this is the second video that you're getting from me this week. And today I'm going to try and talk about, still connected to it being Eating Disorder Awareness Week, and we're going to carry that theme into next week as well, because in the States it's going to be Eating Disorder Awareness Week there. I've had a think about what I could potentially talk about tonight, and what I decided on was to look at the issue of diagnosis, and the whole theme is to do with breaking the silence for the Beat campaign. And I was thinking about the self-help group that I facilitate and the members that are in there, and I was thinking about how never once did I consider a diagnosis for them, or consider them as being a diagnosis, or fit them into a category of having a diagnosis. Obviously sometimes when I'm speaking to them or engaging in some of the difficulties that they have, I do try to think about the difficulties they could potentially be having and the backgrounds that they've maybe come from and how hard that could then be for them. And I do have ideas for some of them and I do think about it, but for the most part they are who they are, and that's what this breaking the silence is. I think we have these preconceived ideas as to what we must be struggling with to have an eating disorder. And I know a lot of people may have been diagnosed, but there's a huge amount of people out there who haven't. And I work with people who, to the best of my knowledge, haven't necessarily been diagnosed with an eating disorder, but are in the eating disorder support group because they need the support. And they bring with them a huge degree of other issues, and that's what this is about. And so breaking the silence with regards to eating disorders also has to take into account mental health problems, and you don't have to wait until you get to what fits the criteria for an eating disorder until you say something. And if you're going to go based on fitting into a criteria, you're incredibly limited, because the criteria for eating disorders and the number of different eating disorder diagnoses that exist is very, very limited. And most people, most of the time, don't fit into that. And if you say, for example, if we're thinking, if you take your typical diagnosis with anorexia, and the person fits all the criteria and is diagnosed and is taken into hospital and goes through a period of weight restoration and to a point that's a healthy weight, and then what? They're no longer anorexic because they don't fit into all the criteria. They may be doing better in themselves, but if you're talking about putting somebody in hospital for a number of months, they're not going to go from sick to well in that time. And whilst I'm not saying that hospital care or treatment isn't going to help somebody, you can't take from that person what has happened. And yet I see it time and time again, and I see how somebody maybe gets to a point of being so severe that they need to go into hospital, that they go through the process in hospital, and whilst it helps them massively, the reality is that recovery takes years. And then what happens when they go into this like no man's land, which is they're not the way they were then when they were taken into hospital? Where do you put that person? How do you help that person? And what then happens is that a silence has already been broken because the body has showed the silence. And now what? They're expected to just get on with it, to just be okay. And that's where the wasteland is, and all the people who don't necessarily get to the point of being diagnosed with anorexia because they don't fit the criteria are in that same wasteland. And this is the problem, that if you've got to be able to voice that you're struggling regardless of what level of struggle you are. It is on a continuum, but and there is a level of severity. But you struggling is you struggling, and you have to be allowed to struggle. And you don't have to wait until things are really, really bad again to say, I need help. And I can appreciate that when you're in a place when things should technically be going better for you, how hard it is then to say something. But throw the diagnosis out, you know, just even if just for this week, and people watching this video, forget about a diagnosis, okay? Ignore it. Ignore the fact, just ignore it, okay? Whether you've been diagnosed, haven't been diagnosed, don't want to be diagnosed, whatever, just ignore it. And you need to sit down and you need to look at what you're struggling with. And that has to be your point. It has to come from in here. You have to know what you are struggling with. And it isn't about then saying, oh, she's anorexic, she's this, she's that. I work with people who have eating disorders. And I'm not going to say they have one type of eating disorder. They fall into that vast wasteland. But in no way are those issues that they have not severe. And just because they don't fit into a box does not take away that. There are people with incredibly complex problems, with incredibly complex eating disorder problems, complex mental health problems. People with OCD, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, self-harm, you name it. And just because they don't fit into this nice, tidy little box or an eating disorder box, we're just going to say, oh, well, we can't treat that person, which is what is happening. But this is why the BEAT campaign, more voices need to be heard, and the word on eating disorder not otherwise specified frustrates me as a diagnosis, because it's like, oh, well, you don't fit here and here, so we'll throw you into here. Eating disorders are eating disorders, and if you are using behaviours, it doesn't matter whether you're using them a lot, not a lot, sometimes, occasionally. If you need to talk, you need to be allowed to talk. And that is my biggest piece of advice to you is this week. Just throw out the diagnosis, throw it out, just ignore it. Take away all those thoughts that are ingrained in you about what a typical eating disordered person is, and just look at yourself, look at the difficulties, and think realistically about who you could talk to, who you could raise this issue with. That just because before you've broken the silence and now you need to do it again, we all relapse, we all have problems. I've been in that place where I've been recovered for a good number of years, relapsed with my eating disorder, and had no clue how to reach out because I didn't look how I did when I was ill before, and things were really, really difficult. But it's, how do I say, oh, well, actually, things aren't okay? And it is a very difficult thing to do. It's a very brave thing to do. It's a very courageous thing to do, but it is something that you can do. And this whole week is about that. So if you are starting to use your voice, there are resources all around you. If you're watching this video, you'll be aware of other resources. On Facebook, there's resources everywhere. And they are all about giving people an opportunity to know that there's a campaign, there's a person, there's a place, there's a charity, there's a something that you can communicate to. Whether it's me, whether it's a support line, whether it's a charity, it doesn't matter. It just, use your voice, and don't be scared to use your voice just because you don't think you fit into a certain category. Okay guys, I hope that's been helpful. I'll see you next week. Okay, bye.